Good evening, good morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. And thank you for joining us in the final webinar in our Peds March 2023 series for FuturePedsRes. We're super excited to have brought you through this process and now to the very end, at least for this season. My name is Chiamaka Nwachukwu. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a Nigerian international medical graduate from the University of Lagos, and I'm currently a junior clinical fellow at King's College Hospital in London. I serve as one of the co-directors for FuturePedsRes.
Hello, everyone, and my name is Amy Lorber. My pronouns are she, her, and I am currently a fourth-year medical student at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I am also serving as one of the co-directors for FuturePedsRes this year. Okay, and now our last round through some of our biggest supporters through this season. So, I'll go back one. Don't forget to highlight our founders, Mekala and Nick. They have, they kicked this whole thing off, so we are forever grateful to them. We have our longstanding support from the Association of Pediatric Program Directors, so we will acknowledge Dr. John Frona, who should be with us later tonight. So that's very exciting, as well as Colleen Hughes, the Associate Executive Director, who's helped us behind the scenes, kind of make all the Zoom things happen and done quite a bit for us. So we really appreciate it. Also, additional leadership at the APPD, we have Dr. Patricia Poitvienne, who is the president of the APPD, and Dr. Megan Ayler, who is the president-elect, and they have also been huge supporters of FuturePedsRes. This is our schedule for tonight, so we'll get a few introductions from the APPD and words of wisdom, as well as from ComSep. And then we will move on to some tips for the virtual interview season with Dr. Asta. And then we'll have a Q&A. Any questions people can think of, whatever questions people have at this stage in the process, we'll try to answer.
So Dr. Aisha Barbara is here from the APPD today, and we'll invite her to speak and give a short welcome on behalf of APPD. Just as an introduction, Dr. Barbara serves as the program director of the Pediatric Residency Program at Children's National Hospital Medical Center in Washington, D.C. She completed her MD at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School and her residency at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She's also a member of the DEI Steering Committee at Children's National, and their program was recognized as one of the 4 honorees receiving the ACGME's Barbara Rossley DO Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award in 2022. And we're excited to have her with us tonight.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. Well, welcome once again. On behalf this time of the Association of Pediatric Program Directors, or the APPD, one of the organizations who has the privilege of working with FuturePedsRes and their leadership, who've done an amazing job of providing these incredible sessions. Again, I'm Aisha Barber. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the program director at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C., and I have the pleasure of being a member of the board of directors for the Association of Pediatric Program Directors. And we're just really excited about this program. I'm so excited to see the turnout today. There is nothing that makes a pediatric program director more happy than a room full of future pediatricians. So excited to see you all. And I know that you'll all have a profound impact during your careers. I'm glad that you got to look at so many wonderful pediatric residency programs, all unique in their own ways. And I hope that you came away from that kind of tour of program of sorts with the impression that you will be in great hands for the next years that are coming up, and that these teams really care deeply about your training and your experience. And I'm really glad that you get to have this discussion today with Dr. Osta about interviewing. I was asked if I have any personal advice about interviewing, and I would say that my personal advice is twofold. I think first and foremost, be yourself. It's in everyone's best interest for you to show your training priorities and values and how that might align with an educational program and their mission and their values. And honestly, you can't be anyone else, so you might as well be yourself. And secondly, I would say, remember that during the interview, you're learning about programs just as much as they're learning about you, so take advantage of that opportunity. So again, welcome, and I'm so happy that we all have the opportunity to have this discussion. Thank you for inviting me to say hello.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, and we'd also like to thank and welcome and just express our appreciation to the Council on Medical Student Education in Pediatrics, or COMSEP. And with us tonight, we have Dr. April Buchanan, and I'll let her speak a little bit on behalf of COMSEP.
Great, thank you so much for having me. I serve as the current president of COMSEP, and for those of you who are not as familiar with COMSEP, these are your clerkship directors, your advisors for pediatrics, and many of the faculty who participate in your pediatric medical student education process. I currently serve as the Associate Dean for Medical Education. I'm at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, and that's in Greenville, South Carolina. And I'm a pediatric hospitalist, and I'm on service. So if I suddenly disappear, it's possible that I got a call from the hospital, but hopefully I'll be able to stay for the duration of tonight. To really just give you some general advice and sort of process some of the previous webinars, I think that Chiamaka and Amy and others have done an amazing job of really educating you on the process for this year in terms of general applications and what to think about. It's obviously a new year for program directors and students who are doing the supplemental application for pediatrics. So I just want to remind you, if you still don't feel very comfortable with the supplemental application, there are some wonderful webinars that ARIS has actually put together for students to be able to watch and make sure you understand the process. There's a guide that's available. So I just encourage you to make sure you understand that process. And just to review, you'll be able to list 5 areas that you want to highlight about you. And so this is an amazing opportunity for you to say, I want to talk about my research. I want to talk about my advocacy with this particular group. I was really involved with all these volunteer activities with this mentorship program. So again, think about what you want to share and what you want to highlight. And that's a wonderful opportunity because it's hard for programs to read through your entire application and really realize what's important to you and what you bring to the program and what you care about. So I encourage you to think carefully about what those areas are that you highlight and then do a really nice job in that short amount of space that they give you to tell about the program. I also don't want you to overly worry about signaling or geographic preferencing. I think it's a way for you to say, hey, take a look at me. I'm really interested in this area, or I'm especially interested in your program, but don't overthink it because the programs are also learning how to use those signals and how to use those preferences. So realize it's new on both sides. And so there's not a formula for doing it correctly. You just go with what you think. And if there's a place you want to look at you, that's a great way to do it and to signal. The other things I would highlight is don't over apply. From our pediatric group, we say 20 places should be enough. We do realize that international medical grads may need to apply to more places as well as couples. But if you apply in a strategic way, about where your programs are and you get good advice, you should be fine with no more than 20. But please seek out advice if you do have any, concerns on your application or something that may be a reason you need to apply more. Make sure you find a great advisor. The people who are in COMSEP at your institutions, the people who are the pediatric advisors are great. I think this series has been wonderful to see new people and get advice from places outside of your own institutions. So I hope that you've learned from this process and you've thought about how you want to apply. I would also encourage you to sort of make sure you share who you are. We talked about those 5 activities, and the other place to share that is obviously your personal statement. So if you haven't had other people read it, make sure it seems authentic. It's a great opportunity to do that. Don't worry if you get a lot of advice. Everyone has some advice for you. Just take what advice you want and say thank you to the other, and maybe they'll find a typo. Maybe they'll correct some grammar, and maybe they'll tell you that, hey, you forgot to talk about this, and I love this about you, and I think you should add it. So just having different groups of people read it who know you and can give you that advice. I think the last thing I would say is enjoy the process. It's an opportunity to learn about a lot of different programs across the country, or maybe in one specific area if you're really narrowing your application process. But you get a chance to talk to residents and faculty, learn what's important to their program, learn what matches your beliefs and your values and the things that you're looking for in a program. And there is probably not just one program for you. I remember many years ago when I was making my rank list, I just went back and forth in what order. And honestly, I think I probably could have matched in any of those 10 programs that I listed and been quite happy. And so there's probably not just one program. And if you're having that much difficulty deciding, you're probably going to be happy at any of those places. So that is my last piece of advice, and I'll be sticking around for the panel in case anyone has any additional questions. Thank you so much for having me and for having our various ComCEP representatives on the different calls this year.
Thank you so much, Dr. Buchanan. Thank you for the advice. Every time you come, there's always something new to learn, and we are super glad to have you as one of our advisors for this process. So now we'll be discussing a very important part of the match process, the interviews. Applications are important, interviews are just as important. And tonight we have with us Dr. Amanda Oster, who is the Assistant Dean of Advising and Career Planning and a Professor of Clinical Medicine and Pediatrics at the University of Illinois, Chicago. She'll be speaking on putting your best virtual self forward. Please grab a pen and a notepad or your iPad or something, as she'll be sharing a lot of vital information. Dr. Oster, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is such a pleasure. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I think I did check my audio, which is actually the #1 thing to do. I've made so many mistakes already this evening with presenting my own self in the virtual world. So I'll try and help you not to make those same mistakes. So welcome. This is my, I think, 3rd year doing this. We did this for the first time in that very first COVID year for FuturePedsRes, and I was so inspired by that I do a similar talk to my own medical students at the University of Illinois. And I'm happy to share all that I have learned over the years doing this, and also happy to take any questions. So thanks for this opportunity to be here tonight. Okay, so there's quite a few different things, and this is being recorded, so don't feel like you have to take a lot of detailed notes. And I share a YouTube video at the very end where I got a lot of this information from. So you feel free to take notes, but don't feel like you have to. I think most importantly is just to, like everybody else said, is to go with the flow during these virtual interviews, but I'm going to try to give you a lot of information about how to put your best foot forward. So before your interviews, what should you do? You should set up your location. And that may be where exactly you're going to sit. I think it's a great idea for you to practice doing some mock interviews where you're planning on sitting, to make sure that you have sufficient Wi-Fi, to make sure that everybody can hear you appropriately, to make sure that if your animals are upstairs, that they're in a different location, that they're not going to be able to interrupt you. So really setting up your interview location. Checking your audio and checking your video. It's the first thing I do when I get on, particularly something like this, or the interview is, can I get on a few minutes early? Can you hear me okay? Is there any problems with how I sound? So that if there is, that you can make those adjustments right in real time. Of course, check your video. So to make sure that you're finding yourself looking at the camera. We'll talk about how to compose your where to place your computer so that you're really looking at the camera. And I have like 3 or 4 books underneath my laptop today, and that's what I usually do when I need to make sure that I'm really looking at the camera. Make sure you check your platform. Zoom, I think all of us are very used to, but some programs will still use Microsoft Teams or other platforms, and you're going to always want to check the platform that you're using and potentially try it out if you've never used it before. Really important to double check your interview times. Make sure you know the time zone that your interview is in, and then what time your interview will be beginning, so that you can set up your day appropriately. Make sure you practice with any friends that you have, and then plan what you want to wear. So this is before your virtual interviews. I usually say that something that's stable, like a laptop or iPad and tablet, are much better than a phone. Something that you can really put down and is stable. Of course, I think people know when somebody's on a phone, there might be an emergency where maybe something happens that you might need to use your phone, but I would say, like, we really try to be kind of in a stable location. Make sure to test your microphone and webcam with the specific video platform. Some of them are a little bit different, like how much of your that can be seen. So you probably would want to check that with the specific platform. Make sure your laptop is plugged in. I'll just share this evening, right when I was setting up, I think I left my plug-in for my laptop at work. And so I was like, oh no, do I have enough battery? Unfortunately, I had an extra one. So make sure you're plugged in. This was one of the errors that I already made this evening. If you're using wireless headphones, make sure that those are really well charged. If your Wi-Fi is shaky, you can try to physically plug in or try to kind of move yourself to an alternate location. And then I would usually recommend that if you have a profile picture like we do for Zoom, that you could use your Eris photo. That'll help people to be able to recognize you if your camera is turned off. And then, of course, practice with your peers and advisors. You can record yourself to see exactly what you sound like, which I think can be helpful for you. Hopefully you can remove potential distractions. I don't know, I think when Dr. Barber was speaking, one of my children came down, even though I asked them not to come down during this, and you may have seen them flying through the background. But especially for an interview, try to remove people from your immediate vicinity. Try to remove any animals that you might have, and just try to have it, if you have it share with a roommate, make sure that your roommate knows that you're going to be doing something important. Turn off any device notifications. So don't have your email open in the background. You don't want that necessarily like pinging or distracting you during your interviews. If you're a person that usually uses 2 or 3 screens, I would usually recommend that you use one screen for the interview so that you're really looking directly at the camera. Try to silence your cell phone and then mute any other devices. If you have an Apple Watch or something else that might ping you during different times, try to silence that during the interview so that you can maintain most of your focus on the interview. And then, like I mentioned before, if you have pets or children or roommates, try to keep them isolated to a different room if that's possible. Try to, of course, be a quiet background if you can be. Attempt to minimize interruptions. If an interruption happens, I think it's happened to all of us over the last few years, that there's something, an emergency or something that somebody thinks is an emergency that comes to interrupt. I think just to gently explain exactly what's going on so that the person that you're interviewing with knows, so that they can really, you just try to be your authentic self, as like we already talked about. Thinking about your background, trying not to have it to be too busy. Some people would like do blank wall or a statement piece. You can also do your virtual backgrounds. If you do the virtual background, I think that there's some data that especially if the program gives you a virtual background, utilize it. That can help to eliminate or decrease bias, not eliminate, but decrease bias. But when you're using a virtual background, occasionally you'll move and then you'll disappear during the virtual, with the virtual background. So just to be aware of that when you're thinking through which type of background to use. Headphones will basically kind of minimize your background and noise and echo. So you might want to attempt to use headphones. Again, make sure your wireless headphones are charged. You don't want those just kind of cutting out during your interviews. And then practice with a friend or family using that platform, whatever you're going to use. Record it, review it, so that you can kind of see how you sound and how you look, and you can make any adjustments that you might need to make. Okay, so for video, I think you've already heard me say 1,000 times, continue to practice with a friend. I have some photos here of what would be appropriate front lighting. So if you have, some students like to use a ring light. If you have one, they're not too expensive, I think around $20. I actually have never invested in one myself, but try to have a window maybe in front of you, so so that the window is not behind you, so that the front light, natural light, is coming into your face. I always clean off my camera with a microfiber cloth at the beginning so that it's not too blurry. My camera is not too blurry. And then, like I talked about before, making sure your camera is really at eye height. So to put something underneath your computer to raise it up so that you're not kind of looking up or looking down at the screen. So when you ask your friend or your family to go through this with you, you can give them a little checklist. How does your lighting look? How far should you sit? Should you sit like all the way back or all the way forward? So what's kind of the best distance from the camera? Are you moving your hands too much? So if you're a person who always is talking with their hands, you might want to try to minimize that and maybe just a little bit of speaking with your hands. Really looking forward, like how is that eye line on the camera? And then what's the video quality and audio quality, and then watch it, record it, and try to if you need to. All right, so what else should you think about? This is kind of some data from people who do this for a living and are in front of cameras for a living. So TV personalities, and you'll see now if you start to look around, you'll see kind of what they wear, but they'll wear a solid color with some sort of contrast. So maybe like this, I have a solid green shirt and some sort of contrast over top, if that can be seen. They say not a lot of patterns because that can kind of move and be a little bit distracting. So they say not to use a lot of patterns, and they say not to use all black or all white because that can kind of fade in. You want to have a little
Looks like we might have a bit of a frozen connection here. We'll give just a moment, see if she can get back to us.
Okay, I think Dr. Oster is trying to reconnect. So yeah, so while we try to give her some time to do that, if you have any questions from what she has talked about so far, you can just put them in the chat, and then we're going to take the questions after her presentation. We're hoping she's able to come back in soon.
Just a live demonstration of the challenges of the virtual environment, you know, really wants us to appreciate the difficulties.
Exactly. Practical, a very practical example.
Well, this is very practical. So here I am. I disappeared and now I'm back. So I had my phone set up on the side and I was just getting ready to log on from my phone. So this is a perfect example of how you're just going to have to be flexible. This is the virtual world, and who knows just what happened to my internet. But that's like a perfect example. It's really more how you react in those moments than if those moments happen. Those moments happen to every single one of us, as you can see here. And it's really more how kind of how you react. They say to kind of sit forward a little bit on your chairs so that you can kind of make a little bit of use of your hands, and that will make you more engaged and to kind of, you know, nod along. The other thing I did want to mention about was when you're in like little breakout rooms, if you're going to turn your camera off, or you need a break, let people know that you're going to turn your camera off, but then kind of say like, I'm going to need a quick break, I'm going to go to the restroom or whatever, so that then when you want to come back, that you can re-engage. I have heard some stories of students keeping their cameras off like the majority of the time when they're in those breakout rooms, and those breakout rooms are really an opportunity for you to talk with all of the other candidates and to hear about the program. So I would suggest that you really try to take advantage of those. And then we'll go to the next slide here. And here's another technical problem.
Yeah, this is perfect. I'm glad to have done this also. Everyone can watch as I re-present this slide. Sorry about that, everybody. Clicked the wrong thing.
That's okay.
How's that looking? Looking okay?
Perfect. That's great.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so the day of interview considerations, try to join a few minutes early. Even if you think that you're going to be early, you're probably going to end up late. So try to be even earlier than you thought you needed to be. And this will allow you to manage whatever technology challenges that you may encounter. Try to speak slowly and clearly, of course, and try to really use the facial expressions of the individuals to see, am I frozen? Do they understand what I'm saying? Is there some technical delay? So we really continue to try to engage with them using kind of their facial distractions. You can hide your own face on Zoom. I think they've done studies that have looked at how often you're looking at yourself rather than really looking at the other person on Zoom. I think that's somewhat natural, and you can do hide self view on Zoom so that you're not tempted to do that. I've also heard to put like a smiley face up by the camera so that you remember where to look, so that you're really looking at the camera rather than kind of looking at yourself. Practice again where you're going to place your hands, keep a bottle of water nearby, and then if you want to take notes, just let them know that, oh, I'm just going to write a couple of things down, so they don't think that you're doing something else on your phone or something else. So just say like, oh, I'm going to take just a couple of notes, if that's okay. So I talked a little bit about this already, but really just try to remain engaged during the small group. Some programs will have some sort of like get together the night before with the residents, and they do little trivia games or a variety of things, and try to just remain engaged during all aspects of the process. From your first communication with the coordinator through when you're done with your interview, these are all important moments that you have with the program. These are important moments that you can learn about the program and that the program can learn about you. Like I mentioned before, if you need a break, just let somebody just need a quick break and then turn off your camera, get yourself organized, and then re-engage when you're ready to. When you're in the kind of in those small groups with residents, breakout rooms with residents, just have some stock questions. You can ask them all the same things. Nobody knows what you've asked the other ones. So just have some stock questions. What do you like to do outside the hospital? Where's the best place to go to dinner around here? Just a couple of like kind of small talk things that you can use. And then you'll hear about the residents and the things that they like to do in the community that you're interviewing in. So go with the flow. We've already had many demonstrations of this tonight. If suddenly your computer audio doesn't work, you can dial in for the audio component. And then whatever occurs, your Zoom drops out like mine did, you don't have to be in a panic. Like it's going to come back on. It's going to get sorted out. You just kind of go with the flow when it happens. And then your ability to kind of improvise in those moments is going to tell the program a lot more about you than every single other thing. I can remember when we were in real life in interviews that we had a fire drill on the day of one of our interview days. And that meant all of our applicants had to go down 14 flights of stairs with us because there was a fire alarm that went off in the building. And those applicants, how they reacted to those moments was much more important to us than anything else that happened on that day. Because that's what residency is about. It's about, there's going to be little minor things that are going to be hiccups here and there. And it's really how you react when those things happen. And these tips I did not make up. They're all variety of different webinars and YouTube videos. The American Academy of Pediatrics section trainees has a great YouTube video that you can watch, and you'll see a lot of these tips there. and I'm happy to answer any questions. Margarita, I see that you put a question in the chat. Is it preferable to have earphones? I'm sorry, I think that was probably because during that piece, but what the initial question.
Yeah, the original question was, is it okay to use headphones or is it better to use earphones, earplugs?
I don't think it really matters. Yeah, I think it doesn't matter as long as they're charged and you're going to be able to use them. It doesn't matter.
So Amanda, when you lost your connection, you must have freaked out a little bit. You came back very calm. What happened behind the scenes and how did you get yourself back together?
Well, this has happened to me before, as it has happened to many of us. I pulled up my phone and I had everything all organized for when this was going to happen to me. And so I pulled up on the Zoom and I was getting ready to join from my phone from the Zoom when my internet restarted. So I just reminded myself this has happened to me before and I was prepared in the background.
Excellent. I'll just say last season, I was getting ready to do my presentation to the applicants and my internet at my house dropped and I lost all connection to my computer. So I had to call in on my phone too. And I did freak out a little bit. So I think it's hard. I mean, you want to be composed when you get back, but you will, no matter what happens, you'll get a little stressed out, but and you don't want it to be, happening all the time. So you're having a lot of comfort with it, but just know that it does happen to all of us.
Yeah. And I think, a little bit of humility about it. When I came back, I was like, oh, what am I going to say right when I get back? And so I was like, well, I'm just going to say this is what happened, what we're practicing. So thinking about like what I was going to say when I got back on screen helped me to remain somewhat calm. Can you touch generally on what the interview format is, how long, how many people, et cetera? And I'm sure it differs slightly from program to program. I think that might be in the Q&A. Is that right?
I was just moving us forward because it really feels like I feel like this question in the chat is a perfect gateway to the Q&A. We have a couple questions pre-prepared, but I think this will give us, a lot of context and kind of get our minds thinking of even more questions. So let's go with this. So feel free to answer the question about the interview format if you had something.
Sure. I think it does vary a little bit from program to program, but I think generally programs have some sort of introduction. A lot of people have done that more in a virtual environment, like before people used to do a PowerPoint presentation. A lot of times people will send that to you ahead of time to look at. I would look at that or watch that ahead of time because that'll answer a lot of the questions from the day. As a program director, it would always make me feel a little bit tired when somebody would ask me a question that I just went over with them because I'm like, oh, I just told you all this information. So I would be kind of prepared. And then each place is a little bit different, I think, where when I was the residency program director, we would do 3 interviews, faculty and 1 with a resident. Each of the interviews were between 20 and 30 minutes. And then there would be time for the applicants to meet with the residents. So groups kind of between interviews, there would be time for the applicants to meet with the residents. And then a tour, which is virtual. I think most places do a video at this point of tours, but that's so it like a half day affair. And then the only other thing I would say was some educational component, plus minus, but I think some places will do an educational component. So you'll kind of see what the education is like.
Wonderful. And before I have the other panelists jump in, because I'm sure there's some thoughts on, the various formats. And I just want to say we have Dr. Asta, Dr. Buchanan, Dr. Barber, and Dr. Frona. So you've heard from all of them already tonight, but I just wanted to reintroduce them and kind of kick us off officially. So I'll also remind everyone that if you have a question and you'd like to share it, you can share it in the chat. You can share it on social media. We're trying to catch all of those and bring them in. So don't be afraid to ask your question. Now is the time. Now is the best time. So, and with that, I'll open it back up if any of the other panelists had any thoughts on the format of interviews.
I'll just say, I think the one thing that I've noticed over the last few years is that the days have gotten a little shorter. It used to be that they would start at, 7:30 or 8 in the morning and go until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And now we recognize that the Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And so We try to shorten them up. I think the one challenge from that standpoint, though, is for people that are, interviewing on the East Coast and they're from the West Coast, that they may still start early. I know as a program director association, we've said, try to adapt your day for different time zones, but it's tricky sometimes. And so some places may be able to do that. Other places may not be able to, depending upon what the, particular structures of the program is. I think, as Amanda said, the days are generally made up of, morning report or grand rounds or something like that, followed by the interviews, followed by some discussion with program and discussion with residents, and just trying to get people a chance to meet there. In terms of, there was a question about how many people. So each place does it a little bit differently. The most common way is to kind of have one-on-one interviews. Some places may do group interviews with 2 or 3 faculty with one person. That does make the day a little shorter, which is easier. But sometimes it might feel like you're kind of being cross-examined. We all take it very relaxed and kind of want it to be comfortable for you. And so it's just a chance to, to talk to a group of people, and then sometimes even see how they interact with each other too. So whether it's a group of residents or a group of faculty, it's helpful to kind of get a sense of, do they like each other? Do they know each other? That kind of thing. Those are my comments.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So we've got like a lot of questions in the chat, so we're just going to dive right in, because we had the questions collected, but since there are lots in chat, we'll start with those. So there's a question, and it says, how would you suggest to address the question, tell me about yourself? So that's by Kompal Mohan. How do you suggest we address the question, tell me about yourself?
I'm happy to give my perspective. I think this is a great question. I think it can be a little intimidating, but I would see it as a freebie. I always tell people, go into your interviews with your highlight reel in mind. I think a lot of us tend towards humility, which is lovely, but I think it's also important to know what your strengths are, and it's your job during your interview to kind of highlight your strengths. And so if you get your kind of freebie question, like tell me about yourself, then being able to share some of the things on your highlight reel would be great, and give people a sense of your background, where you came from, what's important to you, and what you have to offer.
Sounds good. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just add to that one. I guess I agree. I think it is a chance to just think about what are the 2 or 3 things that you want somebody to know about you. I think, if I asked that question, I'd be wondering, how did you end up applying to pediatrics? What's something that I wouldn't know about you by looking at your application? I think it doesn't help to, well, I guess, if they tell you they try to do this without reviewing applicants in advance, then you might have to kind of go into a little bit more detail about, things. But I think you should assume that your interviewers have reviewed your packet and know some of the fundamentals. So I think just kind of something a little bit extra, I think just who you are, I guess, is really what we're looking for. I think, yeah, don't overthink it, I would say.
Yeah, that I hear you. So I because it makes a lot of sense. The interviewers already have your CV, the entire ERAS application, and there's tons and tons of pages on it. So I think that question would be a good idea to talk about something that is not on the application, or that, it's a highlight of your life. So yes, that makes a lot of sense. So this is a very good segue into the next question, which is, how can you appropriately show interest and enthusiasm in the program during interviews and through the entire process? So you like a program, you think you vibe very nicely with the program. How can you show them that you want them very much in the best way, and yes, in the best way possible?
So I can start and someone else can add. So I would think it's really important to know a little bit about the program, having looked at their website and if they sent you any information, so that you can ask questions that are really relevant to their particular program, and also show, hey, I see that you have this, advocacy opportunity in the community with this. You know, I couldn't tell if you were able to do that when you first started as an intern, or do most people wait until later? You know, that just shows that you care about that, that's important to you, and that you have researched the program a little bit to know. So I think that's one thing. The other is just being engaged and listening and having a conversation, so that they feel that you are fully engaged in the process. And that would show interest anywhere and doesn't have to be in a particular place.
I would agree completely. The only thing that I would add, I agree completely, is that your questions tell me a lot about your interests and your values, as well as whether you did your homework. So again, keeping that highlight reel in mind, you know, those questions that you ask can tell me a lot about what you've done, what you've learned, what you're hoping to learn.
Patricia, can you say a little bit more about that? I'd be curious, like, can you give like a practical example of what things people ask you that make you feel that way?
Yeah, I've definitely had people say, you know, I've been involved in this type of research, or I've had this experience and I'd like to grow more in that way. Can you tell me more about your research program and opportunities that you have at your institution? I think that Dr. Buchanan mentioned advocacy, and so often we'll get questions about our advocacy programming because they've done their homework on the institution, and that's something that's really important for them to have as a part of their education and future career.
I would agree with that. I think that those kinds of questions always are more meaningful too than, you know, just what's your favorite part about the program, or, you know, what changes do you have in mind, or whatever. I think it's more because you're kind of, as you can tell from the way she was saying that, you get both a little bit of information about yourself out there, and then you ask a question that shows that you're thinking about the program and what opportunities you might have. The other thing I would add to this discussion is that it's also totally fine to say to anybody along the way, you know, that you meet, to say, you know, just want you, like, you might say at the end, is there anything else you want me to know? Or even if they don't, just say, I really appreciate your time today. Just want to let you know, my fiance, you know, is from this area, and we're really looking forward to coming to DC, or we're really hoping to come to DC, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. But it's totally fine to tell us that you're interested in the program.
That's great. I have a related question, I think. So if there's more comments on that, I would welcome them. But in this process, as we're trying to express all of this, what are the best ways to communicate with program directors? When is it appropriate? How, you know, what are the best ways to reach you without being annoying? And then this might be too broad a question, but what kind of updates are appropriate? What do you want to hear from us, and when, essentially?
I'm happy to jump in. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I'll jump in and others can add. I think in the interest of trying to keep things fair and equitable across the line, there's been some movement to try to discourage a lot of extra communication, particularly between program directors and applicants. So I think what I would say is see what kind of information you get on your interview day, you know, in terms of if they say, if you have follow-up questions, you know, who do you contact? It might be more appropriate to contact the program coordinator, and then they will route your question to the appropriate person. Or if you meet a resident during the day, to kind of work through them. As program directors, we're not opposed to hearing from people. It's just that it starts to become a back and forth. You know, one of my applicants one year, you know, said, I responded to her email and I said something like, you know, thanks, great to hear from you. But I wasn't like as enthusiastic, or I didn't say more than she thought I should. And so people are trying to read into these, you know, emails all the time. I think email is probably the best way to reach the program in general. But I don't think, and others might disagree with this, but I think the whole thing about like writing letters of intent, or, you know, saying a lot of things, or even updates, that's not going to change where you're ranked on the list. If it's a big update, like, you know, you got to accept it to AOA or something like that, maybe, but we'll probably see those in other ways. If your application's updated, we don't just download your application once and never look at it again. It gets updated up until at the time we're doing our ranking. So you should just assume that we're getting that information, you don't need to try to get your name out there more, things like that. I mean, I guess that's my general advice is just a little less, don't stress, it'll be okay. But happy to hear what others think too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think that there's a lot of questions always after the interviews, like, do I need to send these like notes to programs, or that I'm very interested in them. And I think most pediatric programs have really gotten away from, so I don't think that's necessary. If there's a major update, you can let people know about it, but I would say most programs aren't going to change where they rank you based on if they receive one of those notes from you.
Excellent. Okay. Another sort of theme I'm seeing in some of the questions is concern about different elements of the application. So, maybe someone doesn't have a lot of publications, maybe someone's coming from another country and took STEP multiple times. There was another question in the chat about potentially, how do I talk about my family or my baby without, saying too much about it, or, I don't know. So I'm wondering, what are some, I guess, red flags, do's and don'ts in terms of what you're looking at and what applicants should be talking about?
So I can start on that. I also saw one about gaps in the medical education too as part of this. So maybe I'll start with that one. So if you have some gaps, or honestly any red flags, I think your personal statement is a reasonable place to address that if it's really obvious. And it shouldn't be your entire personal statement. You still need to tell who you are and what you want to share. But it is an opportunity to say, and I had a failure of step 1, or I had to take a gap because I had, if you're willing to share, some personal medical issues or some family medical issues, or my parent had cancer and I took time off to be with them, whatever that is. Now your school on your MSPE may say an academic leave or a personal leave, but most schools do not explain that leave. And so it really is up to you to do that. And so I would just say, what do I want them to know? Is that something I want to share? Because if you put it on your application, they may ask you about it, but they still may ask you about your gap, even if you don't list it. So if you choose to address it up front, I think that's very reasonable. If you choose to wait and address it in an interview, but if you learn from the experience, and there is something that changed you or motivated you in a different way, or caused you to look at your patients in a different way, or any of those things, that could be really reflective of who you are and what you learned from the experience. And so that's when it's a nice place to go in your personal statement.
I guess just to
I could
continue.
not agree with that more. Sorry.
Go ahead.
John.
No, go ahead. You're good.
No, I was just echoing everything that Dr. Buchanan said. I would say that your interview and your personal statement are absolutely opportunities. I feel like that was an important word for me there. Interviewers are people, and they might infer things based on, partial information, and your personal statement and your interview are opportunities for you to control a narrative around your experiences. And I look for people with lots of different experiences, and most importantly, for some reflection and what impact your unique experiences have had on you and who you are in medicine.
I agree. I think going to the multiple attempts on a STEP exam, I think step 1, I would say for IMGs or non-IMGs, I think it's something programs will look at. Some programs, may have the perspective that they don't want anybody who's failed step 1. We know that step 1 doesn't necessarily predict performance as well as, step 2 or even 3, or how much they predict. I mean, there's all those kinds of questions. But so I think, if you have 2 attempts, then I would probably look at their personal statement to see what they learned from it, or, if there was some other, extenuating circumstance. I would want to see something, because with those red flags, it is helpful to have some comments in your personal statement if you feel comfortable, as people have been saying. For step 3, I think that one, we know the pass rate there is higher. And so if somebody has multiple attempts there, it might make me worry about how they would perform or what their knowledge base is, things like that. So it shifts it a little bit. Doesn't mean you can't match. It just means you have to kind of, get some good advice about where to apply and how many to apply to and things like that, which is really true with all these things, with these, glitches that people have in their record. Lots of students have them, and it's doesn't mean you won't match. It just means you have to kind of be more thoughtful and get some good advice is what I would say. The other question that Amy was asking about in terms of, family issues, things like that, programs are not, they can't ask you those things. If you bring it up, then it is an open discussion. So if you're willing to share about, either interest in starting a family or, people with kids, without kids, I mean, those are fine questions to ask the residents. Tell me about how many people are married, single, how many people have kids, no kids, all that kind of stuff would be fine to ask. I think it's again, it's what you feel comfortable sharing. It's totally fine. Peds is generally family friendly. We like kids. So I think people are happy to talk about it, and it does add to who you are as a person and what you bring to the program. But I really don't think I don't think it's, if somebody sees it as a negative, that's a problem for them, not for you, I would say. I mean, I think that we all, we want to support our residents in different ways. And knowing, if you've got a partner that's coming with you, if you've got a child, you're looking at childcare or school options. I mean, those are all things that we can help you talk about so that you can get the most information about the program.
Great. Thank you for that. And it's, you mentioned scores, and there have been a few questions about step 3, and then, how programs are able to evaluate academic performance. So one of the questions is around, so step 1, just transition from numeric scores to pass to fail. So half of the applicants will probably have pass or fail, and the other half would have numeric scores. So wondering if that's going to change anything in terms of how programs are looking at the applications. And then also questions around step 3, is having step 3, is it considered as an edge? So if someone has, for example, red flags or gaps, does having step 3 do anything for that person's application? Is that something they could look at considering to help their application?
So I'll speak to the numeric scores, and maybe someone else wants to address step 3. So we've, there are people who took time off, who are doing MD PhDs that will have scores for years, right? And so this is going to be ongoing. I think if it's there, a program will look at it, but it's difficult to compare you to another individual who simply has a pass. And so this whole process of trying to be more holistic in the application, I think is what is important, right? It's not the score, it's who you are and what you represent and what you bring to the program. If you happen to have a great score, wonderful. If you happen to have sort of a regular lower score, it's fine. You passed. You're the same as the P on any of the new scoring systems. So those are my thoughts.
And then I can address step 3 a little bit. There was a question about step 3 and the H-1B visas. I think for a lot of residency programs, it's a lot of institutions, it's harder to sponsor an H-1B visa for pediatrics training programs, just because of the cost to for the H-1B visas. So I would say the majority of visas are the J1 visas that the majority of pediatrics programs would sponsor. If they sponsor visas, would be typically a J1 training visa. As far as if you need to, or if you have any, maybe a lower step 1 or step 2 score, and you have the opportunity step 3, then that definitely can add something to your application, particularly if there was maybe something that happened that caused your step 1 or step 2, like maybe there was a family emergency or something else was going on that was a little bit different, but it's not necessary to have a step 3 score to apply. I don't want that to be seemed at all. It's definitely the step 1 and step 2 are necessary to get your license, your temporary license, but not a step 3. So it's not necessary to have a step 3.
I was just going to add about the question about advocating for your couple. So that's something that is fine to do. I think, during the interview, you could say, well, my partner is going to be looking at the surgery program next week, so we're really excited to see where things go. And that just highlights again that you're in a couples match situation. A lot of people will know that from your application because it's pretty prominent on the ARS application. The one thing I think it is fine to do as well is if, like, say a program offers you an interview spot and your partner has not heard from that institution, it would be fine, maybe give them a couple days, but then I think it would be fine to email the coordinator and to say, we're really interested in your institution. I got an invite from you, but my partner hasn't heard yet. That usually will prompt some discussion between programs, again, if they're doing things well and kind of interested in trying to coordinate. For me, when I had, we had like 80 couples many years out of our 350 applications that we, invited or looked at people. And so it's hard to manage everybody. And if everybody's applying to ortho can only, interview so many people, or ENT, or even surgery. I think, those programs tend to be smaller than PEDS programs. So it may not be possible, but I think it's totally reasonable to advocate or ask. I think, after that, you want to just kind of let the process play out. But in those early phases, to make sure that you're both maximizing your chances to get interviews at a place that would be reasonable.
Well, since we're almost at 9 and everyone has busy schedules, I know, and we're so grateful for everyone who came on the panel and took your time. We'll just open it up. Any final thoughts, pieces of advice? Feel free to touch on some of the remaining questions in the chat. They've all been excellent. Yeah, last words for us as we head out.
I think someone said earlier that just enjoy the process. I actually, in hindsight, I really enjoyed it. And I wish I had really embraced all the people I got to meet, the programs I got to talk to. So I hope you enjoy the process.
Agreed, 100%. This is the first time you'll be surrounded by all pediatricians, and that's really fun.
And I would say utilize those around you. If you get lost, you're not sure, try to seek great advice, reach out to the folks with Future Peds if you don't have anybody at your institution, because I think you can also get great advice from the individuals who've been involved on the various webinars.
Yeah, great point, April. I think that some of you don't have that, like if you're not still in school or if you don't have the same level of advising that some schools do, feel free to reach out. There's lots of people out here who want to help you guys be successful in this match. It's a great, it's a great time because you're getting really close to where you want to be, and we're happy to welcome you into the field. So we're all here for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We have now come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much, Dr. Oster, Dr. Barbara, Dr. Buchanan, and Dr. Frona. You have been amazing, and this is just the perfect way to end such an amazing journey. I have learned a lot, and I believe that other applicants who have participated also have. We're truly grateful to the leadership in the pediatric community, which is undoubtedly the best community to be part of. To applicants, keep an eye out on FuturePedsRes social media platforms, website, YouTube channel for information and upcoming events. Thank you all so much.
Bye, everyone. That is a wrap. Thank you again. Keep in touch. We'll try to post resources and, still be useful in our post-webinar era here in the 2023 season. But thank you everyone so much for joining us for all of these, and we'll see you on the interview trail.
Bye.